My presentation today will be going over our Green the City 2020 initiative, give some highlights about where we are in the program, and then specifically drill down a bit into the green buildings target that we've identified for this program, and then just provide a brief overview on what we're doing within that specific work category, and then just also maybe to give you a flavor of what's happening and what's falling out of that work program, some of the initiatives that have already kind of gotten underway or been kickstarted by this initiative that will help us to hopefully achieve our goals in 10 years. The first question I had that came out of this was, second question actually is, why the greenest city? So this is a politically generated goal. It's an aspirational goal, and I believe, I would agree with you that we should be pursuing this target in the spirit of cooperation, whereby we're all trying to achieve it as fast as we possibly can, but we should all be trying to help each other out to get there, and always be leading best practices in unison. What I will say is that this target comes from the oratory of the political realm. It is tested quite well with Vancouver residents in that, 75% of those polled in a recent survey identified that becoming the greenest city in the world was a good target for the City of Vancouver, and that it was something that inspired them. So while not perfect in the realm of identifying what we need to do in the most constructive way, I think when you look at it from the terms of actually how do we consolidate the public buy-in on this, at least at a regional level, it's not a bad way for trying to capture the public's imagination, at least in the short term. But I agree, we'll need a different way of talking about this more substantively in the future. So how have we been doing to date? Some of you have probably already seen this, but the City of Vancouver has a history of climate protection leadership. We're among world leaders in terms of per capita greenhouse gas emissions at about 4.6 tons per person. If you look at our greenhouse gas emissions since adopting Kyoto in the early 90s, you can see that we achieved about 1990 emissions sometime last year, and we're on track to achieve our target of below 1990, 6% below 1990 levels by 2012. And when you look at Canada's greenhouse gas emissions profile, you can see what we believe this to be is the price of the reaction that a price spike in natural gas prices had on oil sands development, and how that actually affected national greenhouse gas emissions profiles. But you can see we've managed to be trending down, at least in the meantime, while the nation may be going in the other direction. But hopefully that dotted line on the yellow side will be going further down. The reaction to achieving these goals and to actually finishing a lot of our major projects like the Green Building Strategy, like our first generation of our Greenways and Bikeways plan, and our Downtown Transportation Plan, beg the question, what's next? A Canadian musician, Rufus Wainwright, who I like very much, said, your second album is always your hardest album, right? Because he said, I had 17 years to write my first album and make sure that it was perfect. And then he had to write a second album in 2 years while he was touring and while he was exhausted and away from home, and it had to be better than his first album. And I think that's actually some of the challenges we faced with doing Vancouver's Sustainability 2.0, which really became, you could argue, had its roots in eco-density and then has really more taken off with Vancouver's Greenest City initiative. So this was published May a year ago, and it was our Bright Green Future report. It identified 10 long-term goal areas, from everything from green economy to green buildings to how do we have lifestyles that have a lighter footprint. So an interesting leadership document in that it identified things that are both specifically within the city's control and legislative authority to achieve, but then things that are explicitly outside of the city's common toolkit for being able to affect people's lives. So interesting in that regard. We then, and this is a little a quote I like to put up when we're talking about what we did with it next. We realized that while this program or this these 10 goal areas and the targets associated with them were developed by a panel of experts, we realized it wouldn't really go anywhere if we couldn't take this more broadly and engage the community in how we would achieve them. So what we set about to do next was, once we had the goal areas, we launched a pretty large public engagement strategy called Talk Green to Us. It was kicked off with the Pachachika event. It's the only time someone's ever kicked off a public consultation program that I know of in the City of Vancouver, where we charged admission and we sold out to 2,200 people, and there were scalpers at the door. So that was pretty exciting. From there, we also launched what we feel is an innovative online tool which talked about the goal areas, the targets associated with them, and then allowed people to upload or suggest their own strategies and then vote on other people's strategies about how we might achieve these targets in these goal areas. And while we were doing that, we also struck up a series of advisory and technical committees that looked at each of the goal areas, and we broke down the silos within City Hall and had one person who was managing one of the goal areas. My area was the green buildings area. We had people representing every city department, from legal to chief building official's office, planning, development services, you name it, and canvassing them for their best ideas about how we could change the way we do business to achieve these targets. We then struck up an external advisory committee, that's what an EAC is, and that had about 33 people on that represented everyone from industry, whether it be design professionals, people who are in construction, developers, academics, trade associations, to actually help us formulate a strategy about how we would achieve our goal as it related to the built environment. We then took the strategies developed both by the public and by these EACs to an open house. Some of the strategies that were developed by the public went to a Ideas Slam event that we had, which is sort of modeled on CBC's Dragon's Den, where we 4 people got to pitch their ideas to the mayor and another panel of experts about what the city should be doing in terms of achieving its greenest city objectives. And then we went to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and this one's actually kind of interesting because it's the first time we've actually taken a lot of the stuff that we do at City Hall internally and published it publicly. So we have each of the chairs of the internal working groups reported out on what they're doing with their external advisory committees and what they were finding and the challenges with achieving the goals. We recorded these on a series of lunchtime lectures, and you can actually download them on YouTube. So interesting and new for us as a city. I mean, it was something that we realized if we're going to engage broadly on this, we're going to have to break out of our usual tools of just going to open houses and meetings and workshops and actually try to get as broad outreach as we possibly can with the resources that we have. So to give you an example of how that shook out in terms of our green buildings target, which the most significant of which is that we want to achieve carbon neutral new buildings by 2020, it led us down a path to realize, okay, well, first of all, how big is the problem? So in investigating this, we found out that buildings in Vancouver account for about 55% of our total greenhouse gas emissions, a little over half. So buildings are a big issue. If you look at what we have to do to achieve a 33% reduction by 2020 community-wide, which is our other greenhouse gas emission target, and you look at the areas where we can affect the greatest amount of change, we came up with this pie chart. And the results are pretty startling, especially for a policy wonk like myself, who has spent a lot of time working on new green buildings policy. You really find out quite quickly that retrofits are actually where the gravy is, by a factor of more than 10 times. And this assumes that we can achieve a 20% reduction in greenhouse gases and energy use in existing buildings by 2020. The new construction number there, while small, is actually taking into account our ambitious target of achieving carbon neutral new construction by 2020. So it's taking basically where we are today and straight lining it down to 2020. So you can see that It's not an insignificant goal. To give you an idea of orders of magnitude here, what these tons of greenhouse gases mean, as an example, our district energy project in the Athletes Village, a $40 million project that will pay for itself over about 25 years, is set at peak capacity to reduce annual greenhouse gas emissions by about 5,000 to 6,000 tons. So, when we're talking about 170,000 tons worth of greenhouse gas reductions, we're talking about something that's, geometrically larger than anything that we've achieved to date. So, but to give you an idea too, our Green Homes program, which is the City of Vancouver's edition of 1 and 2 family dwellings, greening of our building code, it achieves about a 5,000 ton reduction in greenhouse gases every year now that it's about 3 years old. And we were able to do that for about $15,000 worth of consulting work and about $70,000 worth of staff time. And yes, my time is that valuable.